this is my favorite statement. It is honestly the most eye-opening thing I've ever learned from a security conference is security is the intersection between technology and people. It's not about the technology, it's not about the people, but it's how people perceive the technology.
We sit down with TCFox, who has an odd passion for information security, in this episode of Fur Features from XBN. My name is Paradox.
I'm Ro Jesse.
And we hope you're ready for a deep dive on why information security is often a people issue, not just a tech issue.
We also hope you're ready for a lot of passion. TC is amazingly passionate, and we thought he was the perfect guest to really kind of give it a 101 on this really deep subject.
We also talk a lot about messaging clients. In fact, we kind of just went off the rails on this one because we were having so much fun recording with him.
In fact, we started the interview the only way that really you could about information security. We talked about a TV show. Apparently their core writer team, like, first of all, one of the guys who's in the writer's room, just as a main writer, is a big InfoSec guy himself. But the team that he communicates with, who's all consultants, are like all titans and like the DEF CON circles. So they have a really, really solid crew they're pulling from for all this shit.
And there's a lot of aspects to Mr. Robot as well, where it'll be like, oh, they're hacking this thing, and whether it's accurate or not, it's good. But there's been a few times where, like, you almost wonder how a normal person would even understand it. And a great example, and it blew my mind, was when you've gotten most of the way through season 2, right?
No. I haven't. I've got halfway through season 1. This is the embarrassing thing about it.
It's not much of a spoiler, so I'll just tell this part.
Yeah.
One of the major plot points in the show is that he exposes a bunch of shitty people.
Yeah.
By changing an Nginx config.
Yeah.
Literally, that is a major plot development in a mainstream TV show. Welcome to fucking 2018. Blew my mind. I was like, so
this
good.
Is extremely relevant to today.
Yeah.
Now, I have a story about today. There is a healthcare project which in Australia, which is their equivalent of I guess the NHI, which you know from the UK or whatever. I'm just trying to remember exactly who they are and what they do. It was a patient healthcare public access, see your public health records kind of. It was the front site for it based on WordPress. Okay, now, for some reason, the thing that processes PHP, by the looks of things, got turned off. And now I can just click on a PHP file and see the config file, So this is the thing. By turning off PHP pre-processing, so you literally click, go to, when you normally go to a PHP file, it renders it and then shows you the result.
Right.
And what they
you don't
did
get to see the code.
Yeah, you don't get to see the code. What they did instead was they just turned off the render this first, and then it just outputs the code. Now, normally in a config file, it would say, please,
if PHP doesn't run, give an error.
Well, it's more like, it'll read a whole bunch of variables like, the database password and the database username and where the database is located and all that sort of stuff, stick it in memory, go, I haven't got anything to output, and then just exit. That's how PHP protects its config files. It's hacky, but it works, right? But the result is, if you turn that PHP processing off, your web server is just going to go, oh look, there's a text file. Here it is, everybody. And then now you've exposed your things. This is one of the pet peeves I have with PHP. But anyway, this is.
Well, no, I was going to ask really quickly off of that, if you don't mind me, Paradox, just to start.
Yeah, go ahead. It's good to get in the mood.
Yeah. But like, how much of that, and how much in general of malfeasance as it relates to InfoSec in general is due to, and I think I probably already know the answer, but you can confirm for me, is due to, honestly, deadlines and people going like, you know what, it works fine. If we do it this way, we can ship it by deadline. If we do it this way, we have to re-engineer a whole bunch of stuff. The big question is, how do you start weeding out that kind of culture? Like, how do you start changing the tide on that? Because you work in organizations where that clearly does respect that kind of thing. Well, that's the thing. That is not actually entirely true. Sometimes you need to make a hard call about things. Now, there is a really key
concept here when it comes to software development, and especially in the development cycle of of that particular part of it, is a concept of non-functional requirements. Now, these are things that don't necessarily contribute dollars to the project. This doesn't add.
It's not function.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
function. It isn't the direct value of the application, but you still need it. Now, there is, I will talk a lot about the security non-functional requirements. Now, there are other non-functional requirements
like UX and accessibility.
UX accessibility. Those are great examples. There's heaps. There's a massive list of this. Reliability, performance,
Stuff
all
a
those sorts of
business
things.
analyst couldn't necessarily justify.
Well, no, business analysts are designed to justify those kinds of
Shows
things
what I know.
because it's you need to build that sort of stuff in. If your application does the job really well, but it sucks at performance, you might have further issues down the line. And it's one of those things where the earlier you catch those non-functional requirements, at the very least, design your architecture around capturing that particular idea. Even if you don't necessarily execute on it now, but you architect it so that you can capture it in the future.
So are you saying
it's a lot cheaper?
Are you saying that from the beginning you have to architect it so that the habits that you want people to use during the work of the project will continue? Right? It's sort of like if you write a bunch of really nice code with code comments, chances are the next guy to come along will do the same.
Yeah, then that's a really simple example. Like a lot more of the thing is I have a really hard time with a lot of my job in convincing developers and business analysts and project managers and whatnot to build those specifically security non-functional requirements, but in general non-functional requirements at the design phase. Now, before code is even written, when you're literally just drawing squares and arrows on a whiteboard, trying to get this idea down and trying to figure out how to architect the whole thing. I want security to be considered then, because if I have to go and re-architect a whole bunch of things to go and get security done properly, at that phase, it's a lot easier. All we need to do is move around some squares, right?
And that's also ties into the problem with some of the messaging clients we're going to bring up too.
Oh, absolutely.
Later, like IRC, for instance, where it's security's kind of tacked on top afterward rather than being integrated.
Exactly, and that reflects the culture of the time. We now know better. Like back in the 80s and back in the 90s, we were still trying to figure out what the hell this whole software development thing even is, right? We were acting confident, we pretended we knew what the fuck we were doing, but we really didn't. Sorry, swearing's allowed in this, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay, we pretended we knew what the fuck we were doing, but we really didn't. But that's the thing, if people ignore security, because security can be expensive, right? It's perceived as a very expensive thing, and when deadlines get tightened, security is one of the first things. It's actually one of the first non-functional requirements that gets kicked out, because it's like that security guy is just sitting there nagging on about how much he knows stuff, but we're never going to get hacked. I'm a small company from blah blah blah. Nobody's going to focus on me, and that's of course a completely false.
Yeah, until
statement.
it turns into a multi-billion-dollar company.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You know.
But even those guys are still like, oh no, nobody would care about this one server. It's not publicly listed. Blah 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 blah, and it's all that sort of shit goes on. And the problem is it then gets left later and later and later, and eventually they go, oh, maybe we should care about the security thing. And then they loop in the security guy and go, here's our project. What do you think? And I have to be the one that delivers the bad news and says, sorry, you've actually done this entirely wrong. You need to go and cut huge chunks out of this program and re-architect it so that it's better. And what are they going to do? They're going to go, no, we don't have the budget for
and they're going to go, fuck the security guy.
Fuck the security guy.
Fuck
It's
the
just,
security guy.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's actually my job. Now, despite the fact that obviously it's a shitty attitude to go and have that particular approach to things, my job is to come in actually not only seek these guys out early, but have them seek me out. I need to make security sound awesome. I need to make it sound cool and interesting and fascinating and the sort of thing that you want to be involved in as an engineer, which is why, if you see me in an office space, it doesn't matter whether it's got suit and tie kind of people or whether it's people dressed down. I will always turn up to work in jeans, a geeky t-shirt, and a hacker hoodie, because I don't want to be seen as an auditor type that emerges from my super secure room to go and stomp on your project and make you look bad. I want to be seen as the kind of guy that's interesting and fascinating, and engineers actually want to engage with me because who doesn't want to see a server get hacked, right? That's so cool.
Your idea is to make them go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if this would work. Let's go ask TC if that's a good idea.
Exactly.
Right, so they go to you first, and then you can say,
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if they want to avoid me, they can absolutely avoid me. Shadow IT in organizations is a huge issue. If somebody wanted to go and dodge my, dodge my advice and dodge security and just release a damn product, I will never know that their project even existed because they can easily dodge my view from it. They can spin up their own cloud infrastructure, they can do their own development life cycles, they can use frameworks that aren't approved, and there's shit all I can do about it. But if they want to engage with me, they want to do the right thing, which most people do, right? But if not only do they have faith in me helping them, but they actually are interested in this, then they're going to actually, we'll both get the right result. I'll come in early. I'll help you guys architect it the right way the first time while it's still cheap to do so. And then you guys won't have to go and suffer the cost of trying to do security the hard way later on down the track, because you will need to do it. Even if it costs you $40,000 to do it now, it's better than it costing you $40 million further down the track. So,
right. Well,
if you don't do it.
Yeah,
very good.
I want to get down to brass tacks though, because I've been waiting. This is all really interesting.
Yeah,
I've been kind of waiting for the moment because I expected you to just come on here and tell us why Telegram is so effed up.
I know. Yeah, sorry. I was gonna loop in that.
So I do want to talk about messaging clients with you, especially because I know it's a passionate topic and it's super useful, especially for furries in the fandom who use tons of different communication platforms. Yeah. But before we jump into the specifics of the individual platforms, is there something that just generally because it seems like the people who run these different messaging platforms, Telegram and Wire and WhatsApp, they all, and huge list, they all seem to want to do the right thing. They all seem to tell me that their security is a concern and it's a top priority and it's built into our app. And, what messenger doesn't say secure somewhere in the description? Is there something that they're definitely missing, right? Beyond just maybe the specifics of the crypto, other than rolling their own crypto, because we all know that's a bad idea. Is there something that, why do they seem to constantly miss the mark?
So there's certain different motivations for certain clients. And of course, at the end of the day, you're not going to get a client into the market. First off, the biggest hurdle you need to do when you're introducing a messenger into the market is that whole network effect. You need more people onto the platform. The more people that are on the platform, the more useful it is, right? Regardless of how good the protocol is, the biggest goal you need to solve is how many people are on there. If you're the only person on the most awesome chat messenger ever, nobody else is going to use that chat messenger because you've got nobody to talk to.
Right.
And you can actually see this reflected in a lot of the early efforts in trying to launch video telephones back in the sort of 70s and 80s. They were kind of expensive, so nobody bought them. So the people that did buy them didn't have anybody to talk to, so nobody bought them. So So the thing is you've got to. A lot of these guys are trying to, at least initially, get past that first hurdle of minimum viable product, right? And that minimum viable product is different for a lot of different messaging apps. So quite a lot of the time, security or privacy, for want of a better phrase, isn't necessarily their first priority here. They want to make a compelling, fun, interesting, exciting looking app. Sometimes it is the more compelling sort of thing. So if you have a look at Signal's history, for example, Signal initially started off as actually kind of a very geek-oriented, very privacy-focused, and very, very much about the crypto kind of thing. And as time has gone on, it's made itself more and more user-friendly by adding in more chat-oriented features. Like just recently, they've launched a reply feature for, you can click on a message and say, I'm replying to this specific line. That's only a recent feature with Signal, whereas with Telegram, that's actually a bit of a different, right off the bat, they wanted to do a very full feature-rich client.
It's interesting because I've even noticed, even with something like iMessage, and I think Google Message, Google's messaging clients and services don't have a reply to a specific message feature. So it's interesting seeing some of these things we take for granted in the fandom propagated out everywhere else.
Agreed. Google's a whole other shit show because they've reinvented their freaking chat.
Yeah,
It's like
Google's a mess.
70,000
I don't know,
times.
And 5 minutes after we release this episode, Google
Yeah.
will come out with a new messaging client.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, so I think what's interesting though is it seems to do with like not only priorities, but how much UI and UX they put into it, right? Because there are
absolutely.
really secure messaging systems that I've connected with and used that are almost unusable. Like they're, and we've talked about like PGP for instance,
Yeah.
right? A lot of good things, some maybe not so good things about the architecture, but at the end of the day, it's difficult to use properly. I mean, obviously, if you sit down and you do research, you can, but it's like how many people like Matrix is another one.
Yeah.
Very complicated to understand every little tiny feature, and it gets too complicated, and all of a sudden, normal people aren't attracted to it anymore.
It's interesting you mentioned PGP in that lineup because I kind of count that a little bit separately. It's sort of there's two protocols here which it would be worth bringing up, which is sort of what I'd like to call sort of a overlap on top of existing protocols. So you don't need to use PGP with any specific protocol. You can use it with email, you can use it with like text messages, you can use it with FTP.
Right.
It doesn't matter, because it's a message layer protocol, not a transport layer protocol. So it's not about how I'm going to connect to you and send you a message. It's about the message I'm sending being enveloped in some other layer, right?
Yeah.
So the thing with PGP is, a little bit different to other comparable protocols like OTR, which again is a message layer protocol, but is more designed about establishing a session and having a conversation in a synchronous fashion rather than an asynchronous fashion, similar to email, right? So they're a little bit, PGP is a little bit different, but it is interesting you mention that because yes, PGP has some very unusable features. I learned the other day, now I've been working in information security for 4 years professionally, and I've been following the information security sort of scene for probably 7, 8, odd years since today. And I learned about 3 months ago that I've been using PGP wrong.
Really?
Like I have been fucking up PGP. It's just like, it is incredibly hard.
I'll never forget the first time I sent a PGP email and I was getting into it. And PGP, is one of those things where, you definitely got to look up the best practices. But it's also a little bit about talking to people and making sure that, like, you're going through the same steps they are.
Yeah.
And I was testing, shout out to Soto, one of my, good friend of mine. I was sending him some stuff, and I said, so do you use it this way or do you do it this way? I feel like I'm kind of new to it. And he replied to me, and he works in information security as well. He was actually one of the developers behind a certain messaging app. I won't name names. And he replied to me and said, LOL, everyone is a noob at PGP.
Yeah, and that's exactly
that was
right.
like,
yeah.
It just shocked me. I was like, really? And it kind of clicked with me. Like, everyone is genuinely a fucking noob at this.
Yeah.
Because it's like every other month there's like a new article about like, make sure to use this, make sure to do it this way.
As not as necessarily like as a hardcore user of it, I dropped it. I think most people probably do. I played with it because some people say, "Oh, this is something you should do." I experimented with it for about 3 days, literally in high school, like 13 years ago, and then I just didn't care. I'm like, if I'm really sending something that secure, I'll find another way. I'll do something else with it. But this is not usable. I can't put this into my workflow.
So this jumps into another question, because when you say that, Jesse, what I'm realizing is...
This was a long time ago, though, so I don't know.
Right, but is it because you'd rather not have a little bit of additional security because you're worried about fucking it up? Because that's the other interesting thing is it's like, and TC, and this actually relates to our website breach that we talked about where, it was revealed that people were using very insecure passwords. And it was revealed that a lot of people said, well, I didn't use a secure password because I didn't think the website was secure to begin with, so I never cared.
That's interesting.
And that's fascinating to me. It's
the person that said that works in IT, by the way.
And I know a lot of people who actually think if I feel like I'm using encryption wrong, I would rather not use it.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of baffling because that sort of shows that there's a bit of a lack of understanding about threat modeling there. So it's understanding who the threats are, what the potential attack vectors are, and what sort of things you can do with that, and what sort of risks you would be exposed to,
and then setting priorities based on that.
Setting priorities based on that is the key thing. So, and so when it comes to FA, people are going, well, all I do is I look at art on that. totally clean up because there's nothing else on FA aside from just really wholesome sort of pictures. For example, I'm just sorry.
Oh, of course. No. I completely understand. Just all of your Christian family art. I understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is why my password for FA is fuckoff123.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is there is more damage you can do when you have somebody else's account on FA, right? Like now. There are people who might know you through FA who will send you notes, etc., etc. Now, what I could do, if I knew your password because you didn't care, now I can go and send other people notes. I can send your friends notes and damage your reputation if I had that particular motivation. If I didn't like you, I could pretend to be you and make you look bad. I could do things where I could threaten people in very manipulative ways. I could do all that sort of stuff. There are other attacks where I could glean potentially private information from there. Like, you've got a username on FA, not your username isn't your email address. But now I can determine your email address and, maybe I can use that to go and worm my way into other things. I could trick friends of yours into revealing information to me that might be sensitive. Like, if I know that such and such person through FA is a close friend of yours, I could establish something that sounds like it's a genuine conversation and get them to say sensitive things about somebody else.
So all of these things fall under the threat model for a site like FA.
Yeah, exactly. And because FA is not just about art, you are being represented by FA.
Identity.
So you're saying a threat model is something not just that companies and designers have to be concerned with, but just users need to have a threat model.
Absolutely. And threat modeling is a really important skill to learn, although it can be a little bit complicated and it can be a little bit difficult and initially to sort of get your head around. But once you sort of get into the idea of assessing your threats, understanding where those risks might lie, and understanding the environment that you're actually working with, it can make it a little bit more sense. But yeah, I mean, that could be a little bit intimidating for a lot of people. And at the end of the day, it's like, I want to go and look at good, wholesome Christian furry art. I don't want all this stuff getting in the way because I'm motivated, damn it.
Good, wholesome Christian furry art is just going to be a meme for the rest of this interview, just so you know.
Exactly. So that could be a little bit tricky. So yeah, and same, if we're tying it back into PGP, same sort of thing goes around. Like, again, people aren't really assessing their threats when they're using that, using that particular tool. I can't count the number of times where I've talked to people, even information security professionals, where I've said, I need to send you a very sensitive file. Can you please send me, how do I get your PGP key? And they will just email me back and say, oh, here it is. And the thing is
Right.
Wow. So, I mean, it's the public key, so that's the part which you're supposed to send me, right? But the thing is if we're not trusting email, then how do I know that I've got your public key and not somebody else's who's intercepting the emails? Because at the end of the day, that's the threat we're trying to stop, right? It's not that them sending me their public key is the wrong thing. It's just the method they did it. It's like, if I'm trying to set up PGP because I don't trust email, and then they send their public key through email, then
you've defeated your threat.
Yeah. How do I know that this is actually your public key? Now, PGP has other methods where you're supposed to do key signing parties and cross sign other people's keys. And
yes, the key signing party that I was at a few weeks, years, never.
Yeah,
ago.
Exactly, never. And it's like, nobody does this. Let's face it. And B, the people who do it, it's incredibly intrusive and complicated.
Is this like one of those chicken pox parties where they bring their kids all to get chicken pox? And you hear stories about it, but I'm like, does anyone actually do that?
Actually, I don't know about that. I mean, it seems plausible because apparently chickenpox is something that's like, it's a lot milder when you're a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you kind of want to get it almost just because it's more controllable, which means I'm screwed.
My friend in primary school thanked me for me giving him chickenpox.
When he was a kid. That's a hell of a holiday card right there.
Exactly, right? And he's like, well, I'm glad I got it out of the way this early because I don't want to get it later on when I'm an adult because it gets way more intense.
Now I'm scared.
So before we even consider the threat model that, let's say, the average furry would have, I want to jump into messaging clients, specifically Telegram, which is a difficult one because there are just an endless list of issues that Telegram has had and will continue to have, just not only because of how popular they are, but the mistakes that they've made. And, so I don't know. We could just ramble these off and just start going through them.
So to kick that particular part off, going back to when I was talking about the initial motivations of these messaging clients and how they were initially formed, Telegram's purpose was for more usability and a friendly experience, right?
Right.
So what they did, which was, again, following a few trends that was happening at around about the time when it came to the whole app thing, they wanted an easy sign-up process. They didn't want you to have to do the whole traditional pick a username. Oh, that one was taken. Choose another one. Okay, finally you've got a username. Now choose a password. It must be blah, 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 blah characters. Type it in again. Oops, you made a mistake. Do it again. Blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And then eventually you go and hit the registration button, and then it sends you an email, and blah, and then you've got to do the verify email thing, blah, blah, blah. It's a huge barrier to entry for people to just get on board with the app. So what they did instead was they said, don't give us an email, a username, don't give us anything. All we want is your phone number. And the only reason why we're asking for your phone number is because iOS and Android won't give it to us.
Right.
And they'll send you a text message, you type in the number in the text message, boom, you're online. That was all it was. Type in your number, type in the confirmation code that's at the top of your screen right now, you're done. You're online.
Does it also not help them verify against, let's say, bot accounts and spam? Well, I mean, obviously not. Obviously, there's plenty of those, but an extra speed bump, because typically it's harder to register a number, isn't it, unless you're actually a real living human being who's gone through that whole registration process.
Yeah. I would say that getting a phone number is a lot harder than getting an
email.
Getting an
And
email.
I think some of it too is there's also a difference in different types of social media I've noticed, where there's some social media that seems to follow the kind of older internet architecture of like a screen name or a handle where you kind of have an online account or personality that you have.
Yeah.
Like a Reddit would be an example. AOL Instant Messenger, RIP, would be an example. But then there's like the whole Facebook, Google Plus approach where you're
real names
a
only.
real person, real face.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And you have nothing, I don't want to say nothing to hide, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you represent yourself. It's your phone number.
And that can be really jarring for furries as well, which I think is probably why Telegram appealed a little bit, because it was quite easily to approach, and of course the stickers thing really clicked with furries. Right?
Oh yeah.
So as a platform, again, once you're in there, you can set a username for yourself, so your display name can reflect your furry name. You've got your stickers, which reflect your furry personality. It was actually accidentally a really good furry platform. Group chats, great for organizing that sort of stuff, even though you can't really discover chat rooms very well. We filled that niche with websites anyway, so you can now publicly find out what.
Yeah,
it's also
and you can link to private groups.
It's also cross-platform as hell. It's on everything, and it was from day one.
Absolutely. But whereas if you go to things like Facebook and Google Plus, they're really jarring to furries, because at the end of the day, you guys don't know me by my full legal name. You know me as TCFox, right?
I've almost lived with people without even knowing their full name.
Well, exactly.
Like, that's just what 2018 internet furry is. Like, you just...
On a slight tangent, makes border crossings extremely difficult in the US, because
also
it's like
con hotel check-in as well.
Yeah,
con hotel check-in as well. It's like, I actually don't know my friend, the friend who I'm sharing a bed with. I don't actually know their actual name.
Yeah, but I mean, it does make sense to me why Telegram caught on though with that architecture, because in a lot of ways it was the perfect bridge that furries needed between the kind of older generation of communication that furries were used to, which was very online IRC.
Yeah,
like we had our own websites, and the new generation, which is very like kids who don't even own a computer, who just have phones, who just have all app-based things and cloud-based things, rather than people having to run their own servers.
And that's such an interesting shift in the furry fandom, right? Like, we've been very accustomed to being very internet savvy, connected people,
and run our own things. Yeah.
In order to be a furry, you needed to be good at computers, because at the end of the day, you couldn't stumble upon somebody in real life and find a furry, right?
Very
it was
rarely.
very, very difficult. Yeah. So what you did was you went onto your local BBS board or news group, or, some dude who ran an internet forum or IRC or whatever back in the day. So you had to know how the fuck the internet worked and how computers worked. And that was a skill. That wasn't inherently expected like it is today. So back then, the internet was very much about run your own infrastructure, run that sort of thing. These days, we expect these to come from services, and there's a lot of people who don't even own computers who are furries, and they can get away with that, and that's kind of cool. But yeah, getting on to the whole sort of topic when it came to the network effect, the thing with Telegram that jarred with some furries is the fact that they don't want their personal life mixing with, their personal life or their personal name mixing with their furry life or their furry name, right?
Right.
Which is why some people didn't sign up for Telegram, was because the way that it works is your primary identifier is your phone number.
Yeah.
Now,
and anybody who has your phone number, it will reveal to them your icon
Exactly.
and the fact that you use the service. Yeah.
Exactly. And the thing is nobody has a furry number and a business and a personal number. Like, people use the same
There's a
thing.
few people who do, but
There's a few people that do, but they're a fairly rare exception. I know a couple of people who do have an entirely separate phone for furry things, but that's expensive,
Yeah.
and dual SIMs aren't that common, and there's that whole thing. If my phone had a dual SIM, I would totally get a furry number and a real number. They would be totally separate things for me, and I would be separating those two lives. But that's not the situation that we live in at the moment. So, at the end of the day, I use my real number that I use and I will put on my business cards, and that's on my Telegram account. And that's really uncomfortable. But the thing is I ended up being sort of forced to sign up for Telegram because everybody else I know is on there. It's actually really difficult these days to say, no, I won't get Telegram, because it's actually really socially isolating. Like, I gave up on Facebook a wee while ago. I literally have deleted my account. I miss out on so many furry events because of this, because they're all organized through Facebook. Because one of the good things that Facebook does have going for it is
event organizing.
Organizing sort of thing. And I'm seeing a similar thing with Telegram. I can't not be on Telegram, because otherwise I'm going to be cutting out 80% of my furry life, because so many people organize and start conversations and build friendships around it.
It's how you meet people almost.
Yeah. So as a furry, I am very much required to leak the fact that this phone number is a furry number, as well as my business number. Those two worlds cross. And, if anybody at work who's got my number in their contact address book signs up, they're going to see that I'm a furry.
So we have to deal with this, right?
Yeah.
No matter how much we want to bitch about Telegram, no matter how much we want to talk about the ups and downs of all these other services, we got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And part of moving from everybody hosts their own infrastructure, right? The IRC days, to where you would trust that person, right? Encryption or not getting there, you still trusted the person running the service. With Telegram, we have to trust them.
Yeah.
And so there's a plethora of shit going on here. Right, we've got the crypto stuff, which we can talk about in a second.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the people who run it in the first place, that being kind of controversial. We've got Telegram being banned and blocked on everything from app stores to various countries. How do we deal with all this? I mean, and I don't know if we want to jump into like the crypto conversation or if we want to jump into some of that other stuff, but...
So the way that I would like to see this tackled is to see a really nice furry-oriented platform, come out that has actually got our specific concerns in mind. Because something that we don't normally do, so something that makes us a little bit different is our motivations with a particular platform. Like, we have a separate identity from our real lives. That's not something that's normally reflected in a lot of platforms. We have different motivations as to how we want to communicate. Stickers are a huge part of the furry culture these days, like it or not. We have very open, for want of a better word, we
want open but independent reachability.
Yeah, exactly.
Is essentially what discoverability.
Yeah,
right?
There's that. The content that we want to access, we don't want that to be censored very, very heavily, because the sort of stuff that we're into, like, wholesome furry Christian art jokes aside, we have some very, very specific and potentially controversial kinks, right?
But people have a wide variety of interests nonetheless.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of people who might get a little bit concerned about that, especially if you start tying in advertising revenue into that whole thing. Companies don't want to be seen with, advertising next to, a 6 foot fox with an 8-foot dick,
And Telegram is trying to have public chat, because I know Telegram's had the issues with not necessarily private chats, but with public chats because of App Store regulations, and also certain countries trying to ban the app because and
that's really jarring with us. Like, I think the general public wouldn't care about that too much, but we do.
I don't know. I
mean, some people would.
I will say this about the general public, though. I mean, I saw a tweet recently, and I'm going to paraphrase it.
Yeah.
But it went something like this. The person said, here we go again, yet another bill in some country or the EU or something like that that's going to try to censor the internet or do something else, and we're going to have to rally up again.
Oh, shit,
and the person said, we need from the ground up architecture that doesn't even have this problem.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than having to, rally up against the government trying to limit it, why don't we have an architecture where that can't happen anyway?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be very difficult to do, and that can have if you're relying on literally mathematical technical controls that ensure that censorship can't happen, that can get very difficult from a scalability point of view. Now, at the end of the day, I'm saying at the end of the day way too much. The internet is designed so that every single device is connected to every single other device. Now, the amount of connections that happen with that is absolutely phenomenal, right? And that has to result in some very interesting architectural decisions for performance reasons. That's why we bottleneck things through trunks, for example, as opposed to trying to connect every single wire to every single device individually.
Token ring works great.
Exactly. We could just make one giant token ring for the entire Earth. Yeah, exactly. God, they could make some interesting... But yeah, and the thing with the public... the public chats, some people, definitely a lot of people don't like the whole censorship sort of thing, but they might tolerate that more than, say, furries will. And it's definitely a very jarring process for, especially me as a Telegram user. I'm not going to pretend that I have entirely wholesome, safe for work chats on there. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm totally okay with the fact that about half the chats I've got on there I can't access anymore because iOS suddenly has an issue with porn.
Right.
That pisses me off. So having a furry-oriented platform that gets around these things by saying this is expected on this platform, and works around those particular problems instead of just going, oh, we'll just bow to Apple's demands, it would be really nice to see.
Okay.
So a lot of that sort of stuff as well. So again, coming back to that whole thing about why we're having issues with Telegram, there's all of those sorts of things. It's clashing with the way that furries work.
So, and we're talking about the architecture of Telegram and the trust model and the things that they have to comply with, right? And it's not even because Telegram's evil. It's just because the way they have designed the system is so that we will have these problems. Not intentionally, but that's what causes it's a cause and effect thing.
I wonder how much of this is related to, and this goes back to some of the Google, we talked about the two competing username handle model versus the verifiable identity model, if that makes sense, with a phone number.
Yeah.
I wonder, it feels like some of this comes from the fact that furry really does seem to be this exception because we are so, as a community generally, very empathetic, very open at our best. And in terms of, we really don't see, of course, there are going to be chats that are amazingly toxic. I'm sure all of us are in a few of them. But by and large, compared to, let's say, Twitter generally, or even Facebook outside of your close circle of friends, can get extremely toxic. And there's no verifiability. There are constant threats and very direct affronts to people made. These are things that I think are somewhat softened in the furry community, that a service like Telegram, it makes complete sense why they would go for a more verifiable, not Telegram. Oh, well, yeah, they do. They try to link to your phone number. It makes complete sense why Google would try to go for a real name model and not caring about the edge case.
In terms of making the internet an easier place to use for average people, I think that is a better model.
Yeah. I think one of the things you're striking on there is a little bit of an interesting debate about the whole, I hate the word because it always brings up political things and I really don't want to go there, but free speech versus, a safe environment.
I think some politics is unavoidable. At least this is pretty high level.
Oh, exactly. And politics is in every single thing. As much as I'd like to try and avoid politics as much as possible,
As much as many of us would, yeah.
It is everywhere. And every single decision you make is influenced by politics, right? But, the thing is when we're building technical controls in place that protect censorship and, do the whole free speech thing and whatnot, you are inherently going to attract toxic people and give them a platform. And that can be a really jarring thing when you've got all of these centralized services at the moment, they're trying to protect their brand identity by not being associated with toxic people. And then if you come out with the one platform that is basically like those guys, but inherently at a technical level and in a way that can't be stopped, allows free speech and totally uncensored discussion between anybody and anybody, you are going to attract toxic people.
Wow.
And
so you're... Okay, so...
Yeah.
What you're essentially saying is you have to be careful with decentralization because you can inherently lose control of it.
Well, there can be... So the problem is everything ends up gravitating towards centralized services. I've seen things where they've tried to invent decentralized protocols and they end up becoming so hard to manage because of, versioning issues and performance problems and all that sort of stuff.
What about, maybe perhaps it's a bad example because it's old, but like email. I mean, but email has spam problems.
Yeah, email has spam problems. Email is centralizing. Let's face it. Who here doesn't have a Gmail account?
Yeah,
at the moment,
true. Good point. Yeah.
We're just sending emails. Now, take Bitcoin into example as well. Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol where you can send, and I say this with finger quotes, which you can't see on audio. You can send money from one person to another.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is the performance issues are so great now that we're now, instead of sending money from one person to another, I go onto my CoinHive account and I send my money to somebody else on CoinHive. It's still on Bitcoin behind the scenes, but
right,
all
because
these
the
things
transactions take so long.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
If I wanted to send somebody raw Bitcoins from one account to another, both of those machines have to be A, really internet connected, B, have fucking huge hard drives because you've got to have the entire frigging ledger on your disks, and C, the power consumption you've got to use just to keep that online is going to be enormous. So you're going to be chewing up so much bandwidth, so much disk space, so much CPU, just managing all of that centralized centralized services are the only way to go. And sure, anybody can spin up a new node and join that network, but we're now consolidating things into a few big guys instead of hundreds and hundreds of little guys. Same thing's happening with email, same thing's happening with Bitcoin, same thing's happening with all of those
things.
Do you think
that the solution is a balance? Do you think it's a balance between decentralized and centralized?
It's a very complicated human problem, in my opinion, because, again, Signal ended up deciding that because they were trying to build a decentralized protocol, right? Back in the day, Signal was a solution where they had the official server, but you could spin up your own one if you wanted to. But it ended up becoming so difficult to ratify protocols and keep everybody up to date and make sure you weren't kicking people off the network, that Moxie Marlinspike, I think it was his name, the guy that invented the Signal protocol, just went, fuck it, this is the server. This is centralized now, I can't do this. There's a really good blog post
But they've
about
centralized it in a way where the liability is very minimal, right?
Exactly.
Like I've heard that they do everything they can to make sure the server doesn't contain logs, to make sure that, right.
Yeah. Inherently, so what they're trying to do is they've marketed themselves as a very privacy, security-oriented protocol, and a large part of that is actually their identity in helping bypass censorship so that you do have free speech in countries where the censorship button is pressed way too heavily, right? And then there's countries like, for example, Egypt and, Iran and,
and I know Turkey's had issues with that in the past as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I could name a plethora of countries in those particular things where Signal has helped out a lot. Unfortunately, using Signal can be a bit of a, for want of a better word, a signal to the government that you are probably a political dissident, but
and then you get into the whole plausible deniability thing, and
which has its own problems as well. But
Telegram's gotten into a bit of that too, because people start tagging it. Well, if you use, it wasn't the joke. If you're using for a while at least, if you're using Telegram, you're either a member of ISIS or you're a furry.
Yeah, exactly.
That ties into a great story.
Oh
about your
yeah,
job
so
later.
I've got.
We can get to that one
We'll
later.
get to that story later on. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But anyway, but going back to what you were talking about when it comes to centralized sort of things, the more centralized a service is, the more the company that's representing it wants to protect their brand identity, because at the end of the day, commercial services probably is the best way to do it. It's quite hard to run a service at that scale as a donation-driven sort of thing, and even those guys will still have a brand they want to protect. They don't want to be seen as this is the platform where Nazis can speak freely.
Yeah.
They want to be seen as this is a network. Right?
But we're supposed to listen to Nazis and understand their side of the story. Just kidding.
Exactly.
Don't anybody take that the wrong way. I'm joking.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
exactly. But so the more you decentralize, the more you're protecting that free speech sort of thing as well. But that comes at the risk of, again, you're now giving those folks a platform, and that can tie your entire network as that sort of thing. So going very, very quickly, hopefully I'm not going too off the rails here. There is a platform which was designed to be an alternative to Twitter called Mastodon. And it is a decentralized Twitter. You can run your own Mastodon server.
Is this like some of the XMPP stuff?
It's a little bit like, think of it like XMPP for Twitter. So it is literally, you run your own Twitter server that federates with other Twitter servers, but it's called Mastodon. It looks very similar to Twitter actually, and it runs in a very similar fashion. It's got some actually pretty cool privacy features to it as well. But one of the things that is quite interesting is when you're choosing a Mastodon server, you've got to read what things these guys, that particular node allows and doesn't allow. And some of those Mastodon servers disagree with the messages that other Mastodon services are talking about and refuse to federate to them. So now you've got the situation where, if I have a very left-leaning Mastodon server that is all about, not saying things that are extremely offensive or hateful or racist, they may choose to deliberately not federate with some right-wing server that's all about free speech and blah, 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 blah. And then now you've got this decentralized but sort of semi-disconnected thing, and it gets really interesting trying to mesh those together.
And then it makes it more difficult for users trying to use this. Okay.
Exactly. So there's a lot of complications when it comes to decentralized protocols that ends up, and I'm just seeing more and more these days, naturally building more and more towards centralized protocols. And that's just the reality that we're in these days. You can't just spin up your own IRC server like the good old days. You can't just spin up an XMPP or even a matrix server. It gets a little bit too complicated with those kinds of things. It needs to be a central service. So bringing it all back, what I would love to see is, again, a furry-oriented service run by furries, but it's a centralized service that, caters to our specific needs and our specific OPSEC, for want of a better word, operational security, where we are, I want to represent my furry life, not my business life. I want to be able to send cute stickers and have a ref sheet and be a fox and, that sort of stuff. And in a way that other platforms don't necessarily capture. That attracts people there. We can go and put in privacy features that protect that aspect of our lives if we so choose. I think that'll be the kind of thing that would solve a lot of the problems that Telegram has, as opposed to using Telegram. But again, getting people past that initial network effect hurdle is the really tricky thing.
So, all right, I want to talk about specifically Telegram, though.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about, let's assume the listener knows exactly the concerns of being a furry and the relationship to that.
Yeah.
Let's assume they know that Telegram's got crypto issues, but they don't know what those issues are.
Yeah.
My question for you is, people say that Telegram's crypto is bad. Not only the way that the user has to use it, and some misunderstandings there, and the way they advertise it, but also the crypto itself. What's going on there?
So I'm probably not the best person to talk to about Telegram's crypto, right? I've definitely heard that there is a lot of strange things that they've decided to do with crypto. One particular use case, which is actually no longer relevant because it turns out they've actually now moved on to a different protocol, was the fact that they used an insecure hashing algorithm. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of specifically what that is, but it is one that it is a particular component of cryptography which has known weaknesses now, or at least in such a way that you wouldn't want to use it for specific circumstances. Now, Telegram has weirdly decided to go for this insecure protocol despite better alternatives being available, but uses it in such a way that the vulnerabilities that have been found aren't actually going to affect them. Now, people sort of sit there and go, well, why didn't you just use the secure one in the first place? And there's actually no really decent answer, aside from the fact that now they do.
And this is also implying that they've sort of rolled their own solution to this?
Yeah, so they did. They wrote their own protocol for it. They claim that they've got mathematicians and cryptographers that invented this protocol. They've got frankly, a little bit dubious claim that if anybody can break that cryptography, they get a lot of money.
I've also heard about some issues there, though. The way that they did the bug bounty, sort of like a bug bounty, right? If you can break into it, they'll give you money or whatever.
Exactly.
I've also heard some controversies about the way they ran that.
Yeah. So basically, the way that they've run it, they said it's only limited to this particular scope, which is basically try and break this mathematical problem, which we know fairly confidently is actually pretty safe. But that's not the thing that concerns me. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not super concerned about the crypto in any major kind of fashion. You're not going to connect to somebody's Wi-Fi and immediately, you're going to get hacked and somebody else is reading your messages and laughing at the porn you share with each other. That's not going to be a situation which you're going to have to deal with, because you've got other layers on top of that particular protocol that are going to protect you. The issue that I have is about the usability of Telegram, the platform, and that ties into the ways that people perceive the security, the usability of that, how people do, understand end-to-end encryption, disappearing messages, all of those security features that you see in Telegram, and can you subvert people's understanding of the security in order to go and break those particular, break into Telegram? That's the kind of area that I'm interested in, and that's not the area that the bounty covers.
Yeah.
And so hence why it's kind of like, it was a bit of a bullshit sort of statement where it's like, if I can trick somebody into giving me the keys, then I've broken the encryption. But that wasn't part of the bounty. What the bounty was can you brute force this algorithm? And the answer is probably not. So
so it was a social engineering gambit instead of
but social engineering isn't part of the scope. Sidechain attacks aren't part of the scope.
More specifically, Telegram is going, we captured this network data, decrypt it, we'll give you money.
Yeah.
Whereas your concern isn't can you decrypt the protocol, your concern is the entire architecture of how the user even uses the encryption,
yes,
how it's advertised to the user.
You've got to take the entire ecosystem into account, and that's not what this bounty's done, which is why a lot of people were pissed off about it, because it's a bullshit sort of statement. It's a bullshit sort of thing, because they know they're safe with that, because they've scoped it down to such a narrow scope that nobody's going to break that. Nobody's even bothered, because it's kind of bullshit.
No, this is where I'm starting to understand when you told us that InfoSec isn't necessarily a technology field, it's a very human field.
This is my favorite statement, and it is honestly the most eye-opening thing I've ever learned from a security conference, is security is the intersection between technology and people. It's not about the technology, it's not about the people, but it's how people perceive the technology, right? And every single at the crux of every single security vulnerability, whether it be cryptography being written wrong, whether it be all the way up to somebody being socially engineered out of some money, it's how people have misinterpreted those boundaries between, those trust boundaries between particular systems and been subverted as people using technology. Those two components always exist in every single security problem. And ignoring the people problem and only looking at the technology aspect of it is the wrong way to go about security.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
I was just saying.
I can't claim credit for that. I wish I remember who was the presenter who showed me that. It was somebody at KiwiCon back in KiwiCon 8. I wish I remember who she was. But yeah, I was just floored with that.
So definitely want to talk about KiwiCon later.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is, because there's a lot of people who might be listening to this and they think, and some people listening to this, maybe they know a little bit about Telegram's issues and they know a little bit about crypto and stuff like that. And they're thinking, well, what about this app and what about this app? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open the home screen on my smartphone right now.
For people who don't know, Paradox has like every messaging client under the sun.
Yes. So I'm that weird guy.
No, so am I. I mean, again, I'm not a breaker when it comes to security. I'm a maker. My idea of doing security is finding every single thing, secure or unsecure, trying different ways about stuff, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, and trying it out and seeing how that fits into a security model. So I'm totally with you there. I've got all sorts of different ridiculous apps.
Okay.
I try them all out.
So speaking of piles of ridiculous apps, I'm going to go through them, and as best you can, within reason, I want you to just talk about some ups and some downs, right?
Yep.
So obviously Telegram, we know plenty of ups and downs, right? We could talk about that for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just jump to another popular one, Signal.
Okay.
So Signal seems to be having the right idea. They've got the good on the crypto front.
Yep.
We've seen some evidence that they do handle themselves well.
Mm-hmm.
What are some kind of downsides to Signal?
So one of the downsides is, it is, again, tied to your phone number. It is very much a SMS replacement, not a...
Okay.
Not like an email replacement or a forum replacement or a chat room replacement like MSN Messenger or AOL was.
So it's sparse on features?
It's not actually, it's getting better, but it was initially very sparse on features. It wasn't even a situation where you could...
Wait a minute. Do they have stickers?
They don't have stickers.
Okay, well, tell that Signal sucks.
Exactly.
All right, moving on. Let's see.
but-
Kick doesn't have stickers. Fuck it. WhatsApp doesn't have stickers. Fuck it.
I mean, I agree.
Let's see.
It's true.
No, but you make an interesting point, though. That's the thing. As furries, Signal is not going to be very appealing because it is not fun. The fun factor of a messaging client is really important for security because nobody's going to use it if it's not fun.
Okay.
And so there's that aspect of it. But, maybe that's not your motivation. Maybe this is for when you're talking about really serious stuff and you really want to make sure that it's secure. I still think it fails a little bit. They do a really good job at most of the stuff they've got there. The disappearing messages feature, again, like any other messenger, you're going to have to be aware that can be subverted at the client side. So it is... This disappearing feature isn't so I can guarantee...
Screenshots and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. It's not so I guarantee that the person who I'm sending the message to can only see it for an hour. Because they can screenshot it, they can take a photo with their camera, they can do whatever they want. They can manipulate the Signal client themselves. I have absolutely no idea that they're actually going to honor that. But what it is it's a signal to the other person that I don't want this message to stick around. And I'm trusting that other person's going to honor that. It's not necessarily...
Doesn't the little status message that says hidden messages enabled, hidden messages, doesn't that also stick around, which is kind of a little weird?
That also pisses me off a little bit because it is a signal. Like if I'm crossing the border at the United States border, and they, for whatever reason,
open Signal, and the first thing it says is disappearing messages enabled, disappearing messages disabled.
Yeah,
it's like
they gotta go. You obviously have some interesting conversations with this particular individual,
or some very good Christian family content.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's that's the thing, and it makes it a little bit more suspicious looking, which you don't want in a messenger like Signal because of it is notorious for being about circumventing censorship, right?
Yeah.
So of course it's going to raise some heckles when it comes to the border. So there's that aspect of it. The final thing I want to touch on Signal a little bit as well, and I'm doing very badly for a lightning round, is
it's okay. No, it's okay.
Is the part where Signal is very much about end-to-end encryption. So even the Signal servers can't read my messages because I encrypt them specifically so that they get only decrypted by the person I'm talking to. Now, how that works is very complicated, and negotiating keys in such a way that I know that message is only going to be read by the person I intend to send it to can be quite complicated. That key dance is quite tricky. So what Signal does is it has a concept called safety numbers, where if I'm talking to you, Paradox, but I want to talk to you in a end-to-end encrypted fashion, we need to meet up in person or through some out-of-band thing that's not Signal that we can trust and make sure that those safety numbers match. If they're exactly the same on both ends, we know that it's end-to-end encrypted. If they do not match, we know that something's going wrong.
Right.
So the problem that I've got with Signal is it used to be in such a way that I would have a safety number, you would have a safety number, and your safety number would be the same regardless of who was looking at it, and mine would be the same when I'm sending it to everybody else. They changed that so that the safety number is just shared between each person, and now it's different for each person I'm talking to.
Is it also different per device?
It's not different per device.
Just their phone number?
Just the phone number.
Okay.
But what that means is now I can't go and publish on like my Twitter account, my website, my blog,
something that somebody might trust.
Yeah, that's somewhere that somebody might trust, or at least just have an additional verification, a little bit more reassurance that this is the right number. I can't just publish that number because it's different per conversation that I have. So if I then go and talk to you, Jesse, we have completely different safety numbers. So
that's a lot of work to verify that. Yeah.
So the thing is though is that a lot of people were screwing up how they were publishing those. They would publish them on HTTP pages without doing HTTPS security. They might publish them on insecure and easily manipulatable sites. They might publish them on something like say LiveJournal, which is if you are a political dissident, you might not want to publish it there because the US government could manipulate it, et cetera, et cetera. It depends on how tinfoil hat you really want to be. Right. And obviously that's not going to be a situation for your average furry, but...
There's also people who say, well, I'm not even going to bother to verify your number unless I know that I care that this conversation's encrypted.
Exactly. And for the most part, it just is. It ends up just being a best effort sort of thing. Like, you talk to the Signal server, I talk to the Signal server goes, okay, these both match, we'll send that off, we'll mark it as not verified, but we're pretty sure it's fine.
You can trust at least up to the Signal server, and then
in that particular part. But if you want really good end-to-end encryption, you really need to make sure that communication between us is done. And so I don't like the model that they do with that, but whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, Signal's not a fun protocol for furries to use. It can be a little bit jarring with the whole end-to-end encryption thing, and if you're really, really paranoid, you kind of just need to meet up in person to go and do that for each sort of thing. So it's got its pros and cons.
Okay. So it's got its pros and cons there on the crypto as well as architecture with phone number stuff.
Yeah.
Similar to Telegram in some ways, actually, maybe their crypto's better, but Telegram's crypto's a little worse, but also Telegram has similar architecture issues.
Yeah.
So,
privacy architecture.
So I'm going to skip over a few here. So one of them I'm going to skip over is Skype because it's just so bloated and there's really no...
Skype is a bit old these days. It's a really convenient thing for talking with your family, and that can be a really...
corporate entities with outdated outdated IT departments.
But it's the Facebook of instant messengers.
Well, speaking of which, the next one I was going to skip over is Facebook because even though they're doing some things to enhance security, there's... Like we talked about with the architecture, real name, real face, doesn't exactly work with furries.
Facebook, yeah, exactly. It's real name, real face. Those sort of issues. Again, privacy is really not. Facebook is not favored for privacy these days, especially with a lot of those allegations that have come up. It's not end-to-end encrypted either, so you have to trust Facebook Facebook is absolutely intercepting your messages and analyzing them for marketing purposes. That may be bad. You have to adhere to Facebook's terms and conditions.
There might be NSA letters at play. Who knows? NSA, like the Snowden docs, they probably are intercepting all of that. So, it's not
now, there's a few messaging apps that I have on here that I just want to skip over real quick, and I'm going to group these together because they seem to be very similar. They don't seem to... I don't know, maybe this is a good thing. I've actually heard people say, these apps don't promise security, but that's actually good that they don't promise security. So a great example is Line.
Yeah,
Line actually has stickers, but they don't seem to really promise security. It's just a general fun messaging app.
They actually, it's really popular within the Asian market. Again, if the conversations you're having are the sort of conversations you don't mind...
the government or whatever,
watching, it is absolutely fine. Like, at the end of the day, that won't be an issue. Line actually took a really weird approach and said, yes, absolutely, we have to comply with the Chinese government here. Your messages are being intercepted. Here is the legal, here is the laws.
And they were very honest.
Yeah, they were very honest about
it.
Because, I mean, that's the thing with the Chinese censorship sort of thing. It's very open and public. Like, this is the sort of stuff that we do, right?
So another one I could group in with that is WeChat. I believe WeChat is very similar.
Same sort of concerns. Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about Wire.
Yep.
Now, I thought Wire was quite clever when I started using it. Now, I mean, obviously, there's something to be said about the UI and possibly even UX.
Yeah, I think that's their biggest challenge.
Yeah. One thing about Wire that I really liked, though, was that at a very basic level, you could just jump in, start messaging somebody. Super simple.
Yeah.
If you wanted to take it a step further and verify it, there's a little badge icon that fills in the more you are able to verify the person.
Yeah.
To the point all the way down to the device that they use. And it would even list each device that person uses and how much you verified that particular device. I thought that was incredibly clever.
That sounds really awesome. That sounds a little bit along the lines of what I'm seeing Keybase, which is another sort of separate protocol I'll talk about later, doing, in the fact that, you are verifying specific devices. Actually, Matrix is very much on that basis as well, where you verify specific devices as opposed to just that person's identity. And that's really cool. The problem with Wire is I haven't used it in about 3 years. I looked at it when I was working 2 companies ago, actually, and I thoroughly disliked the UI so much that I actually just disregarded the platform entirely.
Yeah.
And that's
I think I've got 1 or 2 people who message me on Wire.
Yeah. And I've heard interesting things about their product. I mean, so a lot of the people that work on Wire, I've heard, are ex-Skype engineers, so it's kind of interesting that they're taking that sort of approach. They're basically reinventing Skype from the ground up, but the spirit of Skype, at least anyway. I could be wrong on that on that particular fact. I just vaguely remember that was the case.
Now, what do we know about not only their crypto but the way they implement it?
From what I hear, the idea of it is very well designed. There's similarities with, I think, Signal. The way that it was designed was very well done. How it was implemented, however, and how it was put into practice was apparently not so good. But again, I don't know the facts about that. This was just based on
I've kind of heard that too.
Yeah.
And I believe, do we know how public Wire is about their exact implementations? Because it's closed source.
Again, I haven't looked into it in a very long time. I'm sure there are some people out there. In fact, I know a couple of furries out there who would be probably really good at analyzing this kind of aspect of things. But again, crypto's not my passion necessarily. The application and practical use of crypto is, but the actual protocol stuff, I can take it or leave it. I'm not really that super interested in that aspect of things, because at the end of the day, that's not generally the part that trips people up. So
another one to skip over would be Kik. We could probably throw that in with the rest of the fun general messaging apps. That,
I haven't actually used Kik either, so I couldn't speak with any authority on that one. But
so we can kick that one aside.
Another one. Really quick, before we jump into Matrix, which is another conversation I want to have with you.
Yeah.
WhatsApp. Because WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, but don't they do some interesting crypto things? I mean, what's up with that?
So
What's WhatsApp with that?
There we go. Oh, God, I'm going to leave this interview very shortly. No, I love you guys. So one of the interesting things so WhatsApp has been around for ages, and they've come from a motivation of they wanted to make a fun and accessible client, right?
Right. And I believe WhatsApp is phone number based?
Yeah, it's phone number based, so it's very similar to Telegram, probably less emphasis on the stickers, however, although they may have it. I haven't had a look.
So obviously it's shit.
Yeah. Now, 2 interesting tangents happened in WhatsApp's history. A, they got acquired by Facebook, which was an interesting privacy
conundrum.
Yeah, conundrum. But
call it that.
On the flip side, they also decided that they were going to implement the Signal protocol under the hood. So they actually worked with the guys from Signal and Open Whisper Systems to implement Signal's double ratcheting protocol, which is, again, I'm not going to go into that, but it's to do with the way that end-to-end encryption works, so that the security and privacy is assured when you are talking from one person to another person. But I'm very upset with the way they implemented it, especially initially. What they had was, if I'm talking to you, Paradox, what happens behind the scenes is a bunch of keys get exchanged, and we end up establishing an end-to-end encryption.
Yeah. Which is verified.
Yeah, which is again, we can verify that and whatnot, and blah blah blah. But by default, the UI does not tell me if those keys change. You have to go into a deep settings menu and turn that explicitly on.
And how many people are going to do that?
Exactly. So what that ends up meaning is, if we were being man in the middle, somebody can sit there, negotiate new keys between me and the adversary and you, which would mean that all of our keys change, and I would not know about it because the UI wouldn't notify me about this. I'm really, really pissed off about that.
Well, and what's sucky about that is, to put on a little tinfoil hat here.
Yeah.
Because Facebook knows everything else about the app and how you use the app, that could technically mean that they go, if you enable, I want to know when the keys change, they go, well, we lost that user.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you don't, they know about it, and then you can just go and change the fucking keys, because you know through other metadata possibly, that they have disabled that feature.
I wouldn't say that Facebook is the adversary here. I don't think that, I mean, yes, that is a theoretical possibility, but I think the likelihood of that happening is extremely slim, because if that happened, people would get so pissed off with Facebook. It would be a huge damage to their reputation, because at the end of the day, you can check to see if the keys have changed, even if you don't turn that option on. And all it takes is one security guy to go, that's a bit weird, and then to do a blog post about it for Facebook's reputation to be trash. They wouldn't do that. Now, but the thing that pisses me off the most about this is the fact that I'm establishing an end-to-end communication with you, which means that...
It's misleading.
It's misleading. My assumptions are this can't be intercepted, which means that I'm going to say things to you that may be potentially compromising, right? And then for that to not actually be true puts me at a very extreme risk, especially when WhatsApp has been marketed so heavily as a fairly innocent-looking platform that is very popular, but can be used to circumvent censorship. In fact, a lot of people are saying that WhatsApp is safer than Signal, because it looks less like you're trying to overthrow a government and more like you're trying to have a friendly conversation.
Back to that tagging, kind of putting a red flag on yourself that you were talking about earlier.
I've also heard that about, not to relate, I know it's very different, but PGP, I've heard similar things where you almost say using PGP, if anything, is worse because it throws up a huge red flag.
There's an even bigger red flag, which is there was a protocol called, and I cannot ever remember the name of it, but it's like something secrets. I can't remember what it was called. And this was a protocol explicitly created by ISIS. Or by
wonderful,
by Great. Terrorist cells and terrorist groups and whatnot, as a means to communicate. Now the thing is it works.
Yeah, it's called Telegram. No,
no. But this was very much used as in the same way that PGP is used. Now the problem is if you're communicating using this protocol, it is extremely obvious you're communicating using this protocol, and all it does, and it's a massive, enormous red flag that you are probably a terrorist. So it was a really dumb idea right from the start for these guys to ever be using something like that. And honestly, there's been some really interesting write-ups. I think it was Imperial Violet, I could be wrong, who did a really interesting write-up about how this is mostly just a marketing stunt used by these terrorist folks and not actually
they're smarter than that.
Yeah. And anybody who was actually smart wouldn't actually use this, but it made people feel like they were a part of something, which is a big part of that whole aspect of things. But I'm not going there because it's all very scary stuff. Gets way off topic from we're furries.
So why don't we jump into we're on messaging clients. Why don't we just go through Matrix first, and then we can jump into story.
I just want to very, very quickly talk about the WhatsApp thing. I just wanted to bring up one more particular point in that, which is really important to note.
Okay.
Is the fact that the other problem with WhatsApp, though, is the fact that it leaks shit tons of metadata.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And this is a really important point as well. I've sat there with Wireshark listening to myself using WhatsApp, communicating to somebody else. I think I was actually using the web version of it at the time, but I'm not sure it actually matters. The reality was through the the end-to-end encryption layer I couldn't see. The messages I was sending out were entirely encrypted. I couldn't see what I was talking about. But a layer above that, so I could actually see who I was talking to. So specifically the phone number I was talking to, the fact that I was sending messages, how long these messages were, how frequent these messages were.
I've heard contact syncing as well as stuff that can be...
Can be. And I've only looked at this at a very cursory level, and it freaked me the fuck out, because it's like, if I'm trying to talk using end-to-end encryption, the idea is that you can't easily tell who I'm talking to, at least at a very, that easily,
at least a rudimentary level, you would protect that information.
Exactly, but it was being sent out in the clear. Now, when I say in the clear, I mean it was still being sent out using TLS. But the thing is the server that was receiving that totally could see all of that information. And if you broke that TLS layer, the HTTPS communication that was going out, then absolutely you could see who I was talking to, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And that may be easier or harder depending on what sort of things you're doing. For example, if my browser was compromised, then yeah, absolutely. Or if I had an intermediate certificate installed that allowed me to break that sort of thing, yeah, absolutely, that would be bad. That's in the realm of government's sort of work. So that was bad. I was very upset with that.
Okay.
Anyway, but let's move on.
So all right. So WhatsApp doesn't have stickers. So obviously, we're not going to use it.
I wouldn't say it's an F sticker. It's again just understand what the downfalls are.
No, I said doesn't have stickers.
Oh, it doesn't have. I thought you said it got an F sticker.
No, it doesn't have enough.
No,
stickers.
to me, it gets an F sticker
no.
because it doesn't have stickers, and that's really all the justification you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
An F sticker is the lack of stickers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what it is. So
sorry about that.
So lastly, before we move on from messengers, I want to talk about Matrix.
Yeah.
The platform. And Matrix, when I first start looking at it, this seems freaking great. They're publicly funded. It seems decentralized. They have multiple different clients. You can run your own server. You can verify all of your own crypto and everything. There's features where people who join the chat room can't see previous messages. It just seems like, this seems like it might be a godsend. What are some of the problems with Matrix in terms of usability with the furry fandom?
So one thing I will mention as part of that list, they've actually just now announced stickers as kind of a hack, unfortunately, but they do have stickers. So it is kind of interesting. Now, Telegram actually might be that answer to a furry run server. Like we might be able to start up a Matrix server specifically catered around the furry fandom that would solve a lot of these problems. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the usability is just not quite there yet. It's an exciting protocol. I'm very interested in keeping up with it, but it's a little bit too technical at this stage, which means that a lot of users are going to be confused about how these functions work and how they will solve some of their security and privacy concerns. So you get a little bit like when you first load up the thing, it asks you to type in your Matrix ID, and your Matrix ID is @username : server name, server fully qualified domain name.
It kind of reminds me of XMPP. Yeah,
it's a little bit like the thing with XMPP that I liked was it looked like an email address. Everybody knows what an email address looks like.
Yeah,
it's username @server.
And the problem with XMPP, by the way, in case anybody's curious, if anybody remembers XMPP, the problem with it is it's not mobile friendly. You have to maintain a TCP session. Notifications don't work that great.
They're fixing a lot of that, but again, a lot of people just lost interest in it and moved on, and there's no really decent clients for XMPP. Matrix has a really, really good and well worked on client called Riot, which I'm really impressed with actually. But again, there's just a little bit more work that needs to go into the technical aspect of it before I'm going to be happy with it. I couldn't throw this at your average Joe and expect them how to use this right off the bat, whereas I could probably do that a little bit more with something like XMPP.
It's also hard to recommend it for the crypto because I believe from what I understand, they've done a good job and they haven't rolled their own weird thing, but they've only gone through very simple audits, and I know that some of the issues that some of the audits found were the way it leaks information might be a problem. Some of the ways that they get verified fingerprints might have been an issue. I can't remember the exact, but I remember hearing Matrix was like looking good, but not quite verifiable.
What I've heard from the crypto community is that they've had a cursory glance at it. It uses a lot of the concepts that that Signal has adopted for its protocol. So the whole double ratcheting thing, it does a really good job actually, and nobody seems to be too concerned about it, but it is not finalized yet, and nobody has really given it a decent, thorough audit, which means don't use it for any situations which might put you at risk. That's definitely the scenario. The second issue is a lot of that's the cryptography algorithm behind the scenes, the technical aspect of it.
Right.
The people layer on top of that has not been worked on yet. So exchanging keys with people is still a kind of painful process. You need to verify every single device that this person uses. If they bring a new device on, it makes that person less trustworthy, which means you now need to go and out of band go and say, hey, is your device AXZ324964? It's this huge long string. And And you've got to do that for every single device that they have, and you've got to do that in a secure way, and there's no way that that's sort of been done yet. They're polishing this up, but that's not their concern yet. They need to get the underlying protocol sorted out first, and then they can get all that nice UI UX layer on top of that with all of the key management stuff sorted out after that. And it'll be great to see that, but it's not there yet. And that's the biggest unfortunate thing about it.
I'm really hoping for Matrix. It's been slow, but I mean, especially as somebody like I run a couple of podcasts, and for our live chat room we use IRC, and IRC drives me crarazy. It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand the nostalgia, but it's like, first of all, security is just, no.
It's a shit show.
It's a shit show, right? I mean, you've got server security, but there's like
it's a
counting on users to do it. All the security's tacked on top, not to mention that there's no user are typing things, there's no...
It's one of the things that really bugged me about IRC was the fact that it was incredibly unusable right off the bat. Like, we've got a lot of, especially, I can relate this to the New Zealand furry fandom. Back when we used IRC quite heavily, it was only technical people in there, which meant we lost a lot of the artists, a lot of the really creative types, and a lot of the people who just really weren't that interested in computers. Because the process for joining onto this was connect to this thing, change the port number because 6667 isn't right, you need to do 6697, tick the little SSL button, and then type in this.
Yeah, you have to know what you're doing. Yeah.
And then once they connect in, we go and say, okay, now you got to go and talk with NixServe to go and register your email address and blah, 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 so that nobody can steal your name because they can just easily do that. And then once you've done that, you now need to type /list, which then locks up your client for a long time, spitting out a whole bunch of things.
Right. And then even security, even if you're doing OTR, you're going to either piss people off who aren't using it, or you're going to have to hope that the people on the other end have implemented it correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was lots of complicated sort of things about it because IRC was essentially it was a very simple protocol made back in very simple days, and as time went on, we had to tack more and more shit on top of it to make it work, and it is an unusable mess from a friendliness point of view. I dislike it, and I totally sympathize with that, which is why I'm really quite happy that Matrix has gotten all of those concerns built in, like modern clients do, and I'd really like to see that sort of take off. But again, really need to see that client get a little bit more better polish, get up to the sort of standard that Telegram is, in regards to user friendliness and that kind of aspect of things, before I would say it is ready to go and everybody should be using it. And it's a bit of a shame.
Okay, so what the heck is KiwiCon?
So KiwiCon is New Zealand's information security conference. It's in a similar vein to DEF CON, but a little bit more focused on... Probably the people aspects of it is tied in a little bit better with the technology aspects of things. So DEF CON is very much, it's a very famous hacker conference about, here's the latest vulnerabilities, here's this cool shit that we broke, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas KiwiCon there's a large chunk of that, but there's also a lot of things about, for the defenders, where it's like, this is the policies you need to have, so this is how you would craft policy, a good security culture within your
So DEF CON is here's the problem, and KiwiCon is here's the solution, sort of.
KiwiCon's here's the problem and the solution. It takes a bit more of a well-rounded approach, but it is very much more focused on the hacks and the cool shit, and here's why things are broken, and here's the ways we're solving that sort of stuff. It attracts extremely, extremely clever people. It is actually a bigger convention by a long shot than anything in Australia, as far as I know. It attracts about 2,000 people. It's hosted in Wellington. It's actually a significant number of furries attended there. The last KiwiCon that ran in 2016, there was over 1% of attendees were actually furries, which was kind of hilarious.
That's pretty awesome. How the hell do you get away with calling it just KiwiCon?
Because it's actually been run for quite a long time.
The only thing that bothers me about it is when you just say KiwiCon, it just sounds like a New Zealand convention. It doesn't sound like a security.
I don't know the history behind the name.
Right.
Yeah. But it is world renowned in the fact that it's everybody in the information security community knows about KiwiCon. It's very well regarded. I highly recommend if anybody is in that part of the world or even feels like traveling to that part of the world to totally come along. It is exceptionally well done.
And you've gone along as a furry.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, I've literally gone along with my badge literally saying TC. It's just hilarious.
Now, for the most part, you work professionally in information security.
Exactly.
And you have for quite a while, but your furry life, for the most part, has been separate from that.
Sort of. Now, over the past few years, I've been a little bit less fussed about that, and honestly, if you really knew what you're doing, you could probably link the two lives together. I'm a little bit less concerned about trying to keep those two things separate these days, partly just because a lot of my information security career has been put in that particular track because of furries. And
so what I'm trying to lead you into was the story.
I'm getting there. Trust me. I got that hint. So particularly my career has been put in that particular path because of furries, and I'm going to call out Kaiwana specifically because he actually got me my first job in information security.
He's also a kitty.
It's great. He's very much into beer. As well, so he loves the sort of craft beer scene, which I've been growing into. I definitely enjoy craft beer, but I wouldn't say that it was like my life passion or whatever. But anyway, he gets me this job, and I get introduced to the security team, etc., etc. And then they go, "Oh, so you really into craft beer then?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sort of, ish, sort of thing." They knew that he was into craft beer and that he was a furry, and so they're like, so if he's not from craft beer circles, that must mean. I'm like, damn it. So it is what it is.
So they kind of knew, yeah.
People kind of knew, and I sort of just took a bit of a gamble and sort of went, okay, well, how about if I don't bring it up, but if it does come up, I'm not stressed about it, because the weirder I am about it, the weirder people are going to perceive it as.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm a furry, whatever.
Didn't you have a situation? We made the joke earlier about Telegram being either, people always say if you're on Telegram, you're either ISIS or you're.
Yeah, exactly. I had this literal issue at work at one stage. We were walking out to lunch, and we were somebody from the IT department who also very closely associated with the security team. All of those guys knew I was a furry too, apparently except for one guy. Now, he downloaded Telegram and was just like, it looked like a really cool chat group and whatnot, but there's nobody on there. And it's like, I sort of made the joke about it. It's like, well, yeah, the only people who are on there are furries and ISIS sort of thing. He goes, well, you're clearly not ISIS, so does that make you a furry? and then all of his colleagues were like, yeah, did you not know? He's like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, I thought everybody knew that. And everybody's like, wait, you're a furry? And I'm like, yeah. And he was more weirded out by the fact that nobody was reacting to it, because it's such a boring, everybody knew that fact. And it was like, hang on, how did you guys know it? Like, how long have you known this? It was the funniest thing.
Hey, listen, if it's not weird to anyone else, then you're the odd man out.
Yep. That's the thing. And that's been my approach to it so far, is just be cool about it. Like, if it comes up, just go, oh yeah, this is a thing, talk about the thing. You're always going to get the awkward question of what is furry, which nobody knows how to answer. You're going to get the, awkward question, lots of awkward things about, like, what do you do as a furry? Sometimes the sex question comes up and that gets really awkward, especially in a work context. But for the most part, if you seem confident about it and don't be weird about it, they're not going to think there's anything weird about it. They're just going to think it's just a unusual, geeky sort of, thing. Like, everybody's got hobbies. Everybody's got, that sort of like unusual sort of part of their life.
Snaps play in dumpsters, but we don't judge.
Exactly, right?
I have a question that might actually be good to kind of cap off things. The great thing about furrydom is that there's such a large and healthy InfoSec community. Why do you think there's such interplay between those two? Why do you think there's so many furries in InfoSec, or so many InfoSec people into the fandom?
Well, again, this all ties back into that whole OPSEC thing that I mentioned earlier about operational security. As furries, now this is, again, going a little bit back because it's not so much the case these days. Furry was the internet's punching bag, right? Like, everybody considered furries as weird and mildly creepy, and they're the people you make fun of because they're, socially awkward nut jobs or whatever. All wrong, but that was the way that the internet perceived us. So we didn't really want to cross over our personal lives with furry lives, so we ended up being very naturally very good at the internet because we needed to communicate with each other.
Well, furries make the internet go.
Exactly. Like my ISP is literally a cat. Is literally a kitty. I shout out to Zakari.
I approve of
awesome.
this.
Exactly. We naturally had to be very good at the internet and how it works and communicating and understanding how that goes. So naturally, there's a little bit of InfoSec influence in there. But B, we had to be very good at keeping our furry lives separate from our personal lives and not having those two things overlap. Now, through that, you have to do a lot of natural understanding about threat models and how information can get leaked and what does privacy mean and all that sort of stuff. And you just naturally end up learning that. And as a result, a lot of people ended up having the skills to get into information security right off the bat. And it was a natural transition. That's why I think a lot of furries seem to be quite security oriented and security aware, especially when it comes to IT focused furries, is the fact that that's sort of just been a thing we've been doing all along. We are actually very keen to make sure that we are in control of our data, we are in control of our private information, and it doesn't get leaked out all over the show.
Someone's listening to this, they're interested in this shit. They think InfoSec is cool. They want it to be their passion. They want to work with people. They want to learn more. Maybe they're interested in the crypto. Any just like general recommendations, things to look out for, stuff to watch, YouTube channels, websites, blogs, anything.
Where can you go to learn this stuff?
Yeah, so it's a really hard question to ask because how I got into InfoSec was just keeping on top of stuff. Like my first moment, I remember when I really wanted to get into this sort of stuff was when I was at university and I learned about a concept called asymmetric cryptography or asymmetric encryption, which is about, public and private keys, right? The idea that encryption wasn't necessarily just like, here's a password, it encrypts stuff and it decrypts stuff, but there's two separate components. And the possibilities of that where I could, all of that sort of stuff, it was a very technical thing that sort of sparked me off.
But, and your degree was in just a...
So I actually got 2 degrees. I've got a Bachelor of Business Studies majoring in Business Information Systems and a Bachelor of Science majoring in Software Engineering, which...
So you don't need to go to school for InfoSec?
No, you don't. That's the thing. And a lot of the people who are in InfoSec haven't gone through university. In fact, some of them even left high school really early. But other people have gone through university and taken, very specific courses as well. There's a lot of different avenues into information security as a career, but the biggest thing that I can recommend is have passion for it. Keep up to date with news, subscribe to RSS feeds about security news and discussions about, discussions around those sorts of things. Listen to, there's some really, really good people out there. Like Troy Hunt has some really, really awesome content about web security.
Krebs on Security.
Krebs on Security has really interesting things about, he does really good cyber crime kinds of investigative journalism. Again, really important to keep up to date
Swift on Security.
Swift on Security has some really interesting sort of things about operational security within an organization.
Plus Swift on Security is a furry, so.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
As we all know, right?
As we all know.
Yeah.
And there's, so keep up to date with news. Find people who are in information security and just ask lots of questions. A lot of the time, you will find that we will be absolutely 100% keen to answer any questions you pose. And the smaller the question, even the little small questions, if there's lots of them, I'm sure we'd be happy to go and answer those sorts of things and give you a good feeling about what that sort of thing is. Everything else is just learning the concepts. As you come across something, you go, oh, I should learn this particular concept, or how do I go and solve this particular problem? And it's just, Google is your friend in that particular regards, But yeah, keep up to date with news, learn, keep an eye out for, new trends and security sort of things, and just have a good understanding about how they work and that sort of thing.
Okay.
If you're working in IT and you want to pivot towards security, one really cool way I would recommend doing it is have some discussions within your organization. Maybe organize a lunch, a brown bag lunch where people bring a lunch into a large conference room or in a meeting room, and you can just talk for half an hour about some new security concept you learned, and get yourself established within the organization as somebody who knows a bit about security or is at least interested in it.
So you're saying if your organization doesn't already have InfoSec people.
Yeah.
And if they do, then...
A lot of organizations don't.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of organizations don't have InfoSec sort of things. And if they do, talk to those people. Say, hey, I'm quite interested in security. I'd like to learn more about it. What sort of things can I do? And, get involved in that. Go to local meetups. There's almost always a meetup in your area that will have something to do with security. Meetup.com is a great resource for that kind of thing. There's such a huge variety of ways that you can get into this. I recommend but the biggest thing is just have a passion for it. Be really interested in what the world is doing and which direction it's moving in these days, and just keep up to date with it. It's a really fascinating field to be in, and I guarantee you won't get bored with it because there's just too much to do. But yeah, there's something for everybody there.
Oh my god, dude, my head is completely spinning. That was so awesome. We gotta have him back.
Oh, don't worry, we plan to. In fact, even right after that interview, TC and I were basically looking at each other going, yeah, we gotta do that again. But he did travel quite a far distance to get here, but we'll make that work again.
Please don't hesitate to reach out to us about anything that you're interested in or want to learn about, and we'll find exactly the right person to have on in the fandom, because this fandom has, well, someone who does everything, to be honest.
Yeah, so we're really excited to be putting out the second episode, but we're also excited to be putting out all of our new social media stuff, so you can find us on Twitter at FurFeatures. We've also got a contact page on the website with an email address and some other contact information, so please hit us up if you have any comments, questions, if you have any recommendations for cool people maybe we should talk to. We would love to hear it.